And thank you so much for joining. I want to start with Dear Hollywood. The why is obvious, but talk to me about the process of getting there and you know the emotions of going through it.
Mm, Great question. Thank you for having me. So, Dear Hollywood podcast follows the toddler to train wreck pipeline, which is unpacking why high performing children end up experiencing mental health distress or higher rates of other interpersonal issues, substance abuse, etc. And I started performing at 7, so I had my own experience and version of that, but I knew there was more to mine. And so for the last 10 years or so, I've been researching not only child development and different, healthy milestones, but also what's missing in the ecosystem of entertainment in particular. And when I started comparing and contrasting, it it illuminated this really fascinating conundrum where you have a society that technically prizes these children and sees it as a benefit and maybe even luxury. And there are absolutely inherent privileges and what can come with fame or success and notoriety. But there are some really key areas where these young people are potentially underdeveloped and or struggling with different specific pressures that we wouldn't even know about until we see what's on the inside. So the process of Dear Hollywood was largely research based, and I worked with different medical students, and we had this long list of sources and so much data. And we sat with it for a while, or I should say, proverbial we, I sat with it for a long time. And then I started writing all of the episodes, anticipating that I would have guests. And because I was working with a company, I thought everything was going swimmingly and I could rely on them to do their part and I'll do mine. Well, as fate would have it, things happened contractually and I was no longer able to use any of the guest interviews. And so we had an entire season ready for release, which felt like my, life's work trying to get this mission out. And
Yeah.
then I couldn't do anything about it. So I thought, all right, I can either give up, which I think if you knew the years and years of ridiculousness behind the scenes, giving up in this moment actually would be a viable idea. And I would actually have peace with it, I think. But there was just enough within me to say there's meaningful impact that can be made by this podcast getting out. So I reworked all the episodes over the course of several months, and I collaborated with a really small team, just 2 people who came out to where I live and helped with all of the graphics, all of the design, things that I normally feel so just overwhelmed and behind on. And that can sometimes make or break whether I move forward with something because I think, oh, I don't have all the pieces. So I found, the folks who could help fill in those critical pieces that were missing. And then we did everything independently. And the response was wild. There were over and mind you, this does not happen. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. I've produced a lot of things independently. A lot of things get hardly any viewership. And you're hoping that you can reach an audience, that it'll find someone, and it just doesn't. And this one did. And it found 100,000 viewers, per episode without any formal marketing, XYZ. And so that really showed me the power of utilizing our knowledge of social media platforms and spreading the word for starting movements, etc. But still, it's a sticky point to talk about how much an entrepreneur or someone ought to be willing to go into that, because if you aren't an expert, it really is saturated,
Hmm.
it really is challenging. But this one struck a chord. I think it's in the zeitgeist. People want to know more from a more informed and insider standpoint, not just sensational drama.
Well, I think as much as people follow, right, or may have some idea of that, there really isn't that much. What I thought was interesting too, and this this kind of answered my would have been my second question was stylistically, right? So stylistically, it's somewhat by accident of how that gets laid out. But I think, given the nature of the subject matter and given how you delivered it, I thought that intimate and that intimate nature of it worked well. I think that's part of the reason why it was successful.
Well, I say thank you and I will receive that. And I think it illuminated that there are potentially multiple pathways that could work.
Mhm.
And I had some inner decisions to make when I knew that I lost all of the other, pieces of footage and team members and support. There was a part of me that wanted to just simply like give the absolute bare minimum and say, fine, I'm just going to put it on a whatever mic and I'm just going to get it out there. I was, pretty tired and I'm working, I run a company and I have so many other things going on that I was like, yeah, what do I have capacity wise?
Mhm.
But we did those little fourth quarter decisions where we thought, okay, if we think long term and we think cinematically and we actually consider the tone, that will help with shareable clips, which will help with
Mhm.
communicating the seriousness of the matter and the intimacy involved, and all of those small details I think really did, like you said, make a difference. So it's one of those things where, man, you sometimes you wish you could just like haphazardly throw something together, but even that version was, it took a lot of thoughtfulness.
I think that's the thing that sometimes people may see something that is seemingly relaxed, right? But they don't know
Oh,
that, right, right. But on the back end, no, it's not.
right. I mean,
It's like,
this is a strange parallel, but having worked in front of the camera, there are, usually glam teams of hair and makeup artists,
mhm.
and they joke often that achieving a quote unquote natural, effortless beauty takes about an hour and a half in the chair with two professionals. And that, of course, relates to ridiculous standards and other issues to unpack at another time. But similarly, when we're disseminating something via media, there are these standards that people are unaware of. They're the invisible structures that are driving the platform. And you have to have a knowledge of it. You have to know who you are and how you want to participate with it. I've seen some entrepreneurs who try to kind of like, just go for gold and wait until they get that one viral clip and they'll keep reposting, and that's a strategy. And I see other people who really take the kind of bare minimum because they don't have the capacity, and they hope that something comes from there. I thought, okay, how can I leverage my strengths of storytelling? And, I do have some built in audience, which, by the way, does not guarantee that anyone will
Nope.
click or anything. Um, but it was really kind of saying, okay, let's play to our strengths. How many strengths do we have? And for the rest of the things that we don't, like, how can we compensate without slowing ourselves down so much that we quit before it gets out there?
So what I wanted to get at is, so for creators, there's also this thing that we get to talk about here, which is, hey, you did a successful thing. Now you're chasing the next successful thing. And you're wondering,
Yeah.
where is that dopamine rush, right?
Mm.
Because you don't really know it until you get some of that. And then
Hmm.
then is when you're trying to do different or abnormal things to try and chase that.
Yeah. What's interesting? Gosh, you bring up such a great point. A lot of times, at least in my experience, the more you quote unquote accomplish, the higher the demand for input and the less time you have to even notice and be present to what you're experiencing. And the not only am I not celebrating the milestones or taking time to reflect on growth, but I'm also in a scarcity mindset, ironically, where I'm thinking what I did was somehow not enough. And I'm
Mm.
only seeing the people ahead of me. And I'm only thinking, how do I recreate that? How do I, let's say, if you have someone's attention, now how do I keep it? For people who are looking at it from a profitability standpoint, now how do we convert our customers to be lifetime customers? And it's interesting how it's built into our society and structures and institutions, and I'm not personally super aligned with it philosophically, and yet I still feel the impact of it and the pressures of it. And I think over time, I'm starting to realize with successes, I have to be okay with divorcing myself from what the external markers of success are. Even as a business owner, our company is not scaling rapidly. It
Mhm.
just isn't. And you know what? It is the best thing for the company to be slow and steady and small. And of course, we have huge, goals that we can pursue, but it's just my sister as my co-founder and me at the end of the day full time. And she already runs another company. She has two kids. She's involved in
Mhm.
so many other activities. I'm producing the podcast. I have an artist toolkit supporting, young performers, trying to work on legislation, also writing a book, da 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 da. And so it's like that needs to be enough at some point, or your well-being, at least for me, will just tank. And then it won't be sustainable. So I've had to learn how to the phrase that came to mind was curb my enthusiasm,
Yeah.
um, and not be distracted by the shiny possibilities of what's next, what's next, what's next, and to really kind of pace myself and say, it's okay. If you have to pause, life is going to keep going. And now I understand there are seasons of sprints. I'm in one right now for the next 3 to 4 months, and it's tough. But I have to learn my lessons from my childhood, which is
Yes.
after this sprint, you're gonna have to sleep or you're gonna shave off years of your life. Now, not everyone has the same. I was going to say privilege. I say I'm going to rest, but I still have a lot of things I'll be doing. Life has plenty of responsibilities, but yeah, I think there's something about helping us contextualize uh, how much bigger the experience of life is compared to this tunnel vision that we can get when we taste success. It can be addictive, and it has to be, held accountable, I think.
How do you differentiate between what you want to do for monetary value versus what you want to do for yourself? As you mentioned just now, how do you differentiate between the two things?
Well, as someone who started working as a child and did not have any financial literacy, I was not very privy to making business decisions in strategic or savvy ways. And I would say it was one of my weak areas because I was so focused on impact or the outcome of, a piece of artwork, that I didn't look at how to make it sustainable. And so that's been my learning curve as a founder. Now, I still err on the side of prioritizing impact. However, I'm starting to realize that, and maybe it's just with age and experience, there have been so many projects where I couldn't move forward because I didn't have the funds. And so eventually I had to recognize that if I make some decisions that prioritize money right now, that is going to enable the other forms of impact. So even though my heart is not going to resonate with a certain set of decisions, um as long as I'm not, deeply compromising, like integrity is key for our company and just my sister and I individually. And, as long as we're staying in alignment with our values, we're recognizing now, okay, certain, B2B partners are purely to help offset the cost so that we can go into these other underrepresented communities and really stay there longer and build relationships and let it be meaningful, as opposed to just these kind of one-off, ways that companies like try to show up for someone just to say they checked a box. Like
Mhm.
our priority is for our company, it's, a wellness company, and we're focusing on people who have at least one identity marker that's marginalized. So you might be queer, you might be living with chronic illness, you might be a person of color, you might be disabled, and there are not enough adequate, culturally responsive, practitioners and programs available. And so, we are the funnel to kind of bring all of these people into the fold, and then help them find the resources that support them. Well, that's our guiding light. And we recognize that by collaborating with this larger company for this kind of like, it felt almost shallow compared to where we philosophically like to swim. But it helped buoy us for 2 months so that we could stay in the other communities and serve them better. So, I think it's ultimately a game of, trade-offs um, and then sometimes, yeah, you legitimately, just to stay afloat, like to stay in operation, you have to make decisions. And for those of, for those of the, for those people who are listening who relate more to my side of like feeling guilty for choosing money over all of the other values, I think that's something for us to reflect on and to learn about ourselves through, and to recognize the complexity and the imperfection of this all. We're trying to operate with pure motives in arguably a quite impure market. And so it's not perfect. It feels messy. But staying as true to your values as possible has always been really, really important to us. And we've let go of a lot of maybe chances to quote unquote capitalize off of a moment. We just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And yeah, humans over everything.
Well, that's the challenge, right? If you're building something authentic with representation that's addressing intersectionality, probably like
Mm-hmm.
you and you're wanting to build this over time, then you're having to think long term and you're having to think intentionally about every choice you make.
Yeah.
That part I get that completely. I honestly I wish there were more things in the world where we were making very intentional choices, but I think you do allude to a greater point, which is, well, we have to have the lights on so that we can make
Yeah.
the impact. And I think
Yeah.
that is the struggle of any founder that is primarily, and I say this primarily, trying to do good, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of, like, there's a book called Winner Takes All with Anand Giradis that's like very much like the fake version of the
Mm-hmm.
performative version of trying to help. And
Right.
then but you can very much feel any founder who is actually trying to help going, I don't want to do this.
Well, yeah, and I think there's something to say here that, impact oriented founders may sometimes, um, I may even alienate myself from the founders who can scale rapidly because I automatically assume it can't be done, that these are irreconcilably different. You either do good or you're profitable. And so our intention has been, looking at business models that really can be profitable.
Mhm.
And we've found that it just simply means a slower process overall, because we need more check-in points to actually measure impact more critically. And we don't have the, upfront funds to throw hundreds of thousands of dollars into marketing or paid ads or whatever. So we have to slow down, but we have, and I attribute a lot of this to my sister, who is, I would say a marketing genius. We've found our ways to not only stay afloat but actually be profitable, without compromising our values. So it is possible, and sometimes I think it requires us being honest about like where are our areas of weakness as founders, and how are we self-educating enough to play the role that's necessary until someone else can fill in, or preemptively outsourcing. But I think in some ways, like if we just stall and say I don't know how to do this, or someone else might figure it out but I don't know where they are, I found, at least for me, that slows the momentum and even the passion and the sense of like, this can actually work. And I lose that gusto. And then, another, couple weeks or even a month goes by and you're looking at that project going, oh man, like when are we going to hit that deadline? So I think in some ways, we have to learn how to proactively maneuver our areas that are, that we need to grow in, as well as outsourcing, whether that's Fiverr, or like a full-time employee. Like, there are options. We can do it. It is possible. And then, sorry, the last thing on that is, for me, because of our values being community driven, we recognize that it does feel a little bit at odds with the concept of rapid scaling. And so we're acknowledging that we might actually, until we explore like merger and acquisition potentially, we might serve a smaller community, but that might be ultimately what feels like the best mix of ingredients to support people. And then, no, we're not the next Headspace and we're not the next Calm, but Movement Genius is creating a deeper, more sustainable impact in, the people's lives who do engage with it. The fact that we've been, we've been open for 3 years and we have the same exact people take every class every week. I'm like, come on, like, credit to the instructors, credit to what the company stands for. And great, let them go out and make their impact, and not assume that if we're not hitting 100,000 people or 1 million people, that it's not enough.
Well, I was going to say, as a callback, and you mentioned impact, and if you weren't going to do it, I was going to say, because you talked about impact being the most important thing. And so if you're making a really strong impact with a small group of people versus it's not really hitting, like, I get this. My partner is doing the exact same thing, lives it every day, and they will be like, I think I need to read 4 books on this before I want to act on it, because I really want to make sure I am hitting the exact right notes with the exact right
Yeah.
people, and I don't want to mess anything up. And then I'm a PR person who's effectively a nihilist. I'm just like, oh, just go, just do this.
Right.
Just terrible advice. Works for me, does not work for impact. So one of the questions,
But I mean, sometimes we need the people who are researchers, like, we need to
the
be
balance.
prompted to keep moving, you know?
Yes.
It's dicey. It's like, it just, let it be known, we all feel, you're not alone in feeling the complexity of it and feeling different parts of yourself activated that are like, uh-oh, am I really gonna choose
Mhm.
this? Like, there are so many decisions to make in a day. So, we got to keep doing our best, and give ourselves some grace as well.
Thank you for both making dual purpose here of making, research driven founders feel comfortable, and also making just ridiculous PR people feel like they're useful. So that's good too.
Oh, you are.
Everybody's
Without
needed.
you, how would we get our message out there? I mean, truly, my roommate is a publicist, and I'm listening to her all the time be like, how are we going to play this release so that, audiences feel compelled to go watch the film? Because the film might be wonderful, but if it doesn't, and it's the same marketing tool that we're all feeling, like, our product might be great, but if we don't know how to dress it up in its marketing costume, then, man, it's so sad how important marketing is, but it's also
Yeah.
so empowering once you learn how to harness it.
You just need other voices in the room, no matter what you're doing, right? There was
Mm-hmm.
one quick question I want to ask that was probably from like 10 minutes ago.
Hmm.
But it was okay. So you go through all this experience of sometimes you're doing fast and quick things early in your career and not even quite sure where things are going, to
Oof.
now at least being able to kind of pause, everything moves a little slower, and you can kind of discern what is a good opportunity, what's a bad opportunity. But I have this theory that we probably have 5 or 6 moments in our life that are really worth pursuing. Those are like those sliding door moments where we're like, this
Hmm.
is the moment that's going to catapult career. So when you're trying to discern, and I want this to kind of be general advice for anybody listening, but when you're trying to discern what is a moment that requires you to just go all out on it and go fast versus
Hmm.
how do you discern what's the right opportunity to take?
Okay, I have an interesting set of stories. The first one is thinking that was the case and it backfiring, and
Ooh.
the second is thinking it's the case and I think it actually is the case this time. So, when I was working in the industry full time, things were boiling to a head as a child, entering once we turn 18, there's sort of like this expiration date for kid actors, and you're trying to find your breakout role. And if you don't, it risks essentially like starting over or even being behind others because people don't want to be affiliated with, a former kid actor, which is, it is what it is. So I wasn't getting my breakout role, even though I had been, working consistently for however long. And so I thought, okay, maybe I need to throw a Hail Mary. And my health was already deteriorating, and it was coming from a place of desperation a bit and fearfulness. And there was a particular audition, and I thought, okay, I know how unlikely this is, but perhaps because I've never given it my absolute all, that it hasn't happened. And so I dived in, and I didn't get the part, spoiler, but on the other side of it, I realized, oh, I actually just sacrificed so many core elements of not only well-being and sanity, but also like all other domains of life for this particular dream. And what was underneath the dream was fear and desperation. Now, I needed to go and kind of restabilize and gather myself, before shifting, career paths and exploring other options. But this time around, I I have I will say something I'm proud of myself over the years for doing is actively continuing to learn new skills. And so in this current period of my life, I have skills in, certifications in mind body well-being. I have my industry lived experience and familiarity with social media, storytelling. And then I have, advocacy and passion for, hopefully helping reform systems. And so I looked at all of the skill sets, not from a place of fear, but from a place of strategy and opportunity. And I thought, what can I do with all of these? It's still going to be a Hail Mary of sorts, but I feel connected and grounded in who I am approaching this. So I'm not hoping that it fixes things for me or fills me up or tells me who I am. I'm starting from, a solid awareness of where I start, where I end, what boundaries need to be in place to protect my tendency towards martyrdom. Um, and and so now I have this, I would say I'm living through one of these, 5 or 6 big points, which is all of the projects are kind of contributing to the same overall mission, and it feels like it's reaching this boiling point where if we, hit critical mass with this idea around supporting child performers, that can trickle into legislative reform for children who, of all backgrounds, like child labor across the board, which is still very prevalent, more than people realize. It can also elevate the public consciousness around this topic and bring forward, other conversations around fame and the American dream and things like that. So there's, public conversations that can be held. I can potentially actually find a sustainable way to consult on productions and or use the skill sets to support, pay for my basic living expenses, but still focus on impact. And it ties to what our company is trying to do, which is essentially empower people to understand how their mind and body operate together so that they have tools to manage life. So I would say right now I'm living through that, and I do feel the heaviness of it. It feels like there's this thing that's just, oh, I just wish it could like be birthed into the world and walk on its own, but it can't. It's still in my body. I'm still figuring out how to package it. It's still such a labor every single day. But at every point, I know, okay, not only am I growing personally, so I can carry this into whatever stuff comes after, but it's not from a place of fear. I have a different orientation. And so I think if that helps answer your question, that's felt like the differentiation is truly what's driving. If I'm operating from a place of fear, then everything I create is still going to have some of that in its DNA. There's still going to be kind of the frequency of fear in how I approach things. Now, all that to say, I want to honor that everyone has different levels of circumstances, and sometimes you are in a survival space,
Yeah.
and that first Hail Mary really is for survival. That happens. That's okay. That's natural. So just honoring that. But it felt like, the audition version was the survival self, and this is now the sustainable self, or slightly more sustainable self.
I would also say it's also, you said it's not coming from a place of fear or desperation, but at the same time, this is an opportunity that you're creating yourself versus an opportunity that is being given to you by someone else, right?
That's a great point. I so badly have wanted someone else to notice these issues and step in and do something about them. Oh my gosh, if only other people would do it so I could, I don't know, read for fun.
Yeah.
But uh, realistically, I've been hoping to see reform on sets. That has not happened. It's actually only gotten worse. And now with social media, young talent are in even more vulnerable positions. Um, I've hoped that someone would look at the legislation side and be like, of course we want to protect kids. And that's actually not the case. There are current laws that are reversing or softening the protections around child labor, and which is hard to believe, but many states are encouraging children, and we're talking like 8-year-olds and 14-year-olds, not like 17, almost 18, which is still, its own thing. But so yes, I wanted to lean on other people, but I wasn't seeing the difference, and I could feel this part of me that was like, oh no, it's going to be me, isn't it? Like, I have to do this. But I then had to ask myself, am I doing this just because I always think I'm on a mission and that I have to be like, is it a savior complex? And also, do I need to do it alone, or could I partner with other groups? And so my first approach was, let me try to find someone else who's already doing this and just team up with them. And I think that's maybe a point that many founders miss, which is like, just because we're in a highly individualistic society, we're like, oh no, our idea has to be its own thing. No, I was like, whose bandwagon can I jump on? But I kept finding that the nuance of protecting well-being while reforming the industry, like, it just wasn't there. So that's when I accepted, like, all right, I gave myself a time period. I said, you have 3 to 5 years, because if you try your best here and you don't even make a dent or see one signal to keep going, then, like, for me, I know that I need to keep moving on, or pivot. That's what we did with our company too. But now, sorry, I'm super verbose today, just like talking. But now I'm appreciative that we have seen the signals. We are getting enough feedback, and so I'm doing it. But at the first stop of being able to bring other people in, ooh, I can't wait. I do not want to do this alone.
Well, that's when you're focused on the impact, right? The more people that are involved in that, you want that to happen.
Hmm.
This is the first time in the podcast, 40 some episodes in, which I get to mention Iowa's rollback of child labor laws. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I didn't know I was going to get the opportunity to do it. And I made a quick Google because I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Iowa. It was Iowa. As a
Wow.
Midwesterner, I'm like usually on top of where this is happening. But
Hmm.
yeah, there are multiple states where that is occurring. And you're absolutely right. Then there's the other part of it where people look at celebrity different too, and they go,
Yeah.
well, you're just so fortunate, who cares if you work 16 hours? And
Right. Right.
that, it's not like you're working, in a factory. You're
Right.
getting to
Right.
do cool stuff, so why should we care?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and, and please tell them why they're wrong.
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that we through media have actually expertly curated that appeal, which is
Mhm.
why I understand why people have a misunderstanding of what a day actually looks like. And then second, we also have this illusion of separation where we've placed people in the public eye at a distance, and it allows us to do two things. We can either elevate them to be our idols, or we can dehumanize them and not feel badly at all. Either way, there's distance, and the more distance you have, just like with anything that is quote unquote foreign, it can again, like, fear and judgment and all of this kind of criticism has, I think, more of a doorway. So I don't, consider myself to be really even working in the industry in the way that people are probably imagining. Like, yes, I'm on 3 animated shows, but I do that for rent money. And
Mhm.
then the rest of my life is, I mean, spreadsheets and data analysis. And I mean, running a company, you're literally wearing all of the hats, every department. And yeah, the I think it's important to humanize everyone, no matter what. Yes, the work hours for people in the public eye are astronomical, and actually, maybe worth mentioning, unpaid work and publicity are kind of the backbone of the creative industry economy. I read that from an
Mhm.
article, and I was like, so well put, because in many ways, 75% of your 16-hour day is doing unpaid work. And it can be labor that seems easy optically, or it can actually be like strenuous labor training. Like, there are just a lot more components that go into someone's daily schedule, working in the industry as a performer, or someone else in a different department. So yeah, I think there's a misperception, or just partial perception. I don't also personally have any bone in my body that likes luxury. I don't own. I've never even bought a TV. Let's put it that way. Like, I'm I'm just looking to try to make ends meet. And I have a roommate, and I stay in a small bedroom in her townhome. And we've lived together off and on for more than a decade. And it's expensive to live in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And maybe even if I made more money, I'd still prefer that simpler lifestyle. So I think, yeah, just maybe relaxing the assumption around how human beings in the industry live and operate, and what we value. I'm unfortunately painfully normal and painfully average. Um, so I actually prefer it that way, but doesn't help keep up the false facade too
No,
well.
yeah, but painfully average is real.
Yeah.
Honestly, at any point, like if somebody was like, "Hey, Jeff, you want to have 500 Vistaprint business cards? What would you like them to have them say?" That would
Uh,
be. I'd be like, "Yeah, painfully average."
yeah, but like doing my best, and
Yeah,
I don't
just
know,
just hand you this card here. You know, uh,
right?
what is there any pull to try and go like? Do you miss anything about
Mm.
that? Or is there any pull back, or are you like, I'm good?
You know, I check in with myself here and there, and the more I allow that fearful self to be resolved, the less tug I have to do anything that is in the public eye, that is visible to a mass audience. And I think that's actually some of the tension and discomfort I'm contending with internally right now. It's because I have this sort of Hail Mary of projects that will be visible. I'm not talking about the book anywhere else yet. So hey, exclusive. Shh, don't tell anyone. It's going to be a while before it's out. But I know that that's going to come with a lot of media, a lot of public criticism, a lot of things. And I'm not looking forward to that part of it, because I would rather crawl in a hole and be a hermit. And I just think uh, I I just I want to be normal, the normal person I already am. I want all areas of my life to reflect that, um and the weird and strange middle place that I'm in right now is I still do work in publicly visible spaces. So, um, as of right now, I could see myself maybe writing or producing a series, but anytime I think about manipulating my emotions for an audition only to be rejected a
Mm.
hundred times, I'm like, oh, why did I ever? I didn't know there was another option as a child. Now that I know there are other options, I'm like, oh, I can't fathom. I don't know how other artists do that. Some of my friends still love it, but I learned, which was very sad to grieve, but I realized that that was not really ever my personal dream. I'm i err more on the side of like engineering and science. I like to look at things as math problems. That's how I thought about performances. People would ask me like, what inspires you? And I'd come up with an answer, but I never felt like a creative ooey gooey joy the way I would watch some of my artistic friends. Like they
Yeah.
would get lost in reverie and they'd be daydreaming all day, and I'm like, no, I'm just reverse engineering what outcome I need to appease this particular audience with
Mm.
these particular skills. And the satisfaction was derived in the precision and accuracy, not in the actual kind of creative process per se. So I'm at a crossroads. Either I will rediscover the arts in a way that is actually authentic, and maybe I'll go, oh, this is what it could have been about the whole time. Or I'll do all of those things privately and like learn how to sculpt in a small little community studio, and we'll play with clay and no one will know about it. And I'll find like a career in the mental health field. I don't know after this chapter what will happen. And that's for the first time in my life. I've never taken a break, and I've never not had, a North Star. So that's where my friend gave me the analogy that sometimes purpose is not a North Star. Her name's Joan Ball. She has a book on this. Um, it's not a North Star, but it can be a constellation, and it can be a process of trying a few different things on, and the sense making between each will help. That will in and of itself be purposeful, and a transformative process.
I think one of my sub goals with this podcast, I mean, obviously it's for marketers and creators, but I have all of my like sub interests and I'm like going to throw them in there. But one of the things I'm really fascinated with is kind of dispelling the myth and the automatic assumption that every performer is an extrovert.
Oh,
Mm.
No, no, there is a spectrum where you can absolutely be an introvert in real life and you can flip a switch.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, the persona. Well, yeah, we could go into this from a psychology standpoint too. I'll be as brief as I can be, but it is an area of passion. For some performers, it's actually quite a dissociative experience, and so you are splitting the self between, you could call it. I mean, this is overgeneralizing, but sort of that inner sense of true, authentic self, and then this persona, this facade that helps you get through all of the press, and criticism and hostility and also praise without having like a super inflated ego,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing like, nope, you're still just the same human as you were this morning when you woke up feeling groggy and like, looking real tired like I do right now. So yeah, it can be quite an embodied, or disembodied experience to be in the public eye. And I myself, yes, am very, very introverted. And I don't technically know what came first, chicken or the egg. Is it because I started working at 7, and in response to being on a stage all the time, I became more reclusive? Um, or was there like a natural temperament? Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, my partner will absolutely just point it out, be like, You flipped a switch. Like you
Yeah.
went, like they'll see me on stage, like that's not Jeff. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's the version of Jeff that is required for the moment,
Right.
and so there is something about me that can go into Times Square and
Hmm.
just get a bunch of people to do, I mean, Billy Eichner stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's a part of me that about 30 minutes prior to this where I was like, I just had dry needling done. I kind of want to take a nap. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to pound some Starbucks and I'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
Or it's like, are you going to be ready to go? I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be ready to go. She's like, you'll be ready to go. It'll
Yeah.
happen. But
And then
that
you
is,
press record and you're like, okay,
it just goes.
something's in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
These parts, are you familiar with internal family systems by any chance?
Yes, a lot.
Okay. Okay.
It's sitting behind me.
Okay,
The book.
perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. No bad parts, that one?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, really quickly, it just refers to understanding ourselves as an amalgam of these parts or subpersonalities that came online at, likely meaningful moments in our upbringing. So, in that critical moment, there was a part of you that needed to think, act, and feel a certain way in order to get through it. Well, that part kind of took on its own identity and sometimes still shows up in other moments. And you've got, the parts that are trying to protect from harm. You've got parts that are, I don't know, just all these different pieces of ourselves. And so I think a little bit about how, some of us have our forward facing parts. We have our, more internal parts that, only are seen by like a select handful of people. And really getting to know, and, the book that many people reference called No Bad Parts, I think the title serves a purpose here in saying like, forward facing Jeff is good too. It's
Mm-hmm.
all it's just learning how to maneuver these parts of ourselves with conscious awareness, as opposed to being hijacked by them when you don't mean to be, and then now they're running the show and you're like, oh no, I meant to be honest and vulnerable with my partner right now, but forward facing Jeff is answering the call, and learning how to like, okay,
What
yeah,
happens? That
you know
happens. That happens a lot. Sometimes the wrong one appears, and we laugh about it a lot. Like at family gatherings, if I'm, or it's the more people you put around me, the more
hmm
that flips. So we have 35 people over for Christmas. I'm like, okay, let's go, and it's not even
yeah,
conscious.
right.
Yeah.
But I know that like I'm saying so many words to you all right now, and then for the rest of the day I probably won't speak out loud. I will be doing, work in the garage, emails. I will be learning from other teachers. I'm in an interpersonal neurobiology course, and
Mm.
I myself will not be using words. So I think it's just interesting. Yeah, we might assume like the person we're meeting right now is the totality of who they are. Absolutely
No.
not. We're all, yeah, multidimensional, of course.
As a person who like got mildly known on Twitter for making fun of hustle culture, I
Mm,
I just think that's unsustainable. I mean,
yeah.
it sounds cool. It's like, okay, you want to do this? Well, it's just a matter of time. And I'm like, nah, I think it's just doing something that feels most authentic to you that you can
Mm,
sustain. Because the only
yeah.
things that you can do well and for a long period of time are the things that feel natural and the things that feel right to you. Otherwise, it's just
Mm.
like bad diet culture or other things. You're going to stop.
Yeah, and you also have to look where s- who's who is profiting off of us buying into this.
Hmm.
Like the more that you deconstruct, I mean, we can list all of the isms. The more that you deconstruct, yeah, all of these different institutional ways of thinking, XYZ, then I think it's quite empowering and liberating. And you realize, oh, that was never, I can't say never, but sometimes hustle culture was not actually to necessarily benefit that singular individual so much as feed other machines and beasts, where you're still, ironically, in some ways, only a cog, even though you
Oh, yeah.
feel like you're really getting ahead, and all that to say, like everyone has their own approach, and we can do different things in different seasons. But yes, sustainability for me nowadays in my 30s is key. I do not have the energy I had when I was 20. And these chronic illnesses and autoimmune issues from overworking are telling me to slow down. So yeah, hustle culture, we could go into it. Man, when I actually hear people speak in a way that feels influenced by hustle culture or influenced by diet and fitness culture, that for me now is actually kind of a yellow flag or a moment to pause.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before I used to be like, teach me your ways. How can I become you? And now I'm like, oh, actually, this might not be congruent anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I return to my cave and I listen to other contemplative thinkers and people who are not just trying to maximize and optimize every waking moment, which was definitely how I was. Make every day count, every day, every hour.
If you start talking about yourself like you're a SaaS company, you're doing the wrong things. And yes, yellow flags, by the way, are way more signs of caution than beige flags. Beige flags, fine. Yellow flags, caution.
Oh, beige flags. What is that?
Oh, cool. Lingo that I know. No, beige flag is like if you had a red flag, but a beige flag is just like it's not important, but it's like
Neutral, sort of.
It's real mid, real neutral, and you're like, okay, yeah.
So I guess when we're assessing our strategic plan as a company with my sister, I can be like, ooh, that's a beige flag, but we're going to just keep going. But that's a yellow. We're going to need to pause.
And see, like as a geriatric millennial, the second that I say beige flag is when Gen Z is like, yeah, we're done with that term.
Oh, okay. Well, then I will only talk to my sister about it because she's older than me.
We'll use it in turn. Yes, like fashion trends that finally came to the Midwest. Like it's already over, but now we know about it. Yes. I just always knew like when something got to the PacSun at a Michigan mall, I was like, what's the point?
Yes.
I'm gonna get laughed at on vacation anyway. So
I mean, being from Toledo, Ohio, I know exactly what you're talking about. Franklin Park Mall, yes.
It's not far from me.
Wet Seal. What were the others? There was some Charlotte Russe, I think, was something I don't know. There were some stores.
Yeah, as somebody who did the shirtless thing outside of Abercrombie, dating myself, wouldn't recommend. Bad idea.
Yeah.
Few regrets. I watched the documentary. I was like, yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. We've all been there. I saw an interview of at least hopefully you weren't like totally recorded during all of these moments. I have things that are traceable on Google and I'm like, no, as I'm writing and having to revisit, I'm like, oh, what did I say? Oh no. It's okay. Thank God for neuroplasticity and paradigm shifts. We are not who we once were. We are not, we are evolving and integrating our parts differently.
Whew. Well done.
Are you one of those people who would watch their content?
No. For the most part, I once I make it from a pre-production and production standpoint, I don't want to see it at all. Now, as someone who had to, do my own editing for a while, I was staring at the screen for a long time. But I'm like, I don't want to hear myself. But it's a part of it. And that's the odd part of this season right now is because I'm like doing more interviews than I have in a long time. And I'm just like, Alyson, stop talking, but the things need to be talked about. Ugh.
Yeah.
But no, I won't. I don't want to rewatch unless I'm fact checking myself and making sure I didn't make a fool of myself. Those are the reasons I rewatch, but always at 2.5 to 3 times the speed because I don't have time to listen at 1x.
I can watch myself more than I can listen. For some reason, I'm always picking up on cues. But I think editing a podcast or editing things that you're doing allows you to kind of, or it forces you to
Yeah.
assess. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I've recently noticed that I have started to actually put notes into, okay, this did not go well in this particular recording, because
Mm,
otherwise I have no way of coping with what I'm watching. Like, I'm watching myself speak and asking the questions, and there's no way of coping with it than to actually analyze it and be like, okay, these are the
it's
bad
brave.
things.
I relate to that. I don't know if I can't say whether or not that's, the best approach for me to be doing, psychoanalyzing myself, but like it is what happens, yes. But I think it's normal. Like people are going to be consuming this and you don't know. I just it's time for me to stop worrying too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm as a person who is not detail focused already, I
Mm,
am not focused on did I mess up a word? How many ums are in there? Except for one episode when we talked about ums, and then Vashika had to she had to edit it, and she was just like, "Bet you're gonna say again." So it's like you tell me it, and then I'm like, "Oh no, I'm gonna hyper focus on it." But generally
yeah.
speaking, all I look back on it with now, instead of minute detail, is just vibes.
No,
Was it a
okay.
good vibe? Did it work? Did in this particular exercise, did I listen more than I spoke? Yes.
Mm,
And did I allow space, and did someone gain something from the conversation? And if all those things happen, then cool, job has been done. I'm not concerned of did we spend the right amount of time on this? Did we do
right.
this? There's no outline for a reason, because if we
So
have an outline, then we're just confined.
well, yes, speak for yourself because I'm the person who's like, I love outlines. What is the exact
Ashika
flow
loves
of the
them.
Yeah, I'm like, let me know almost to the second what this interview will
Yep.
sound like when it's done. Um, but yes, I'm learning to play in the sandbox and be more relaxed. As long as you feel like the vibes checked out here, I feel like the
Oh yeah,
vibes checked out here.
great
Okay,
vibes.
great.
Oh no, we're feeling good.
No beige or yellow flags,
No,
Only
no,
just
green,
yellow
only
sweaters.
all
green.
yeah,
Yes.
all agreeing. Allison, when we close these, we do something called keep it short. They are 3 questions. The questions are short. The answers can be however long you want them to be. Are you ready?
Yes, and I'll try to keep them short as well. We'll see
That's
how
fine.
well I do.
It doesn't matter. Vibes. I'll do questions 1 and 3. Vashika, you want to do question 2?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Allison, question 1. Book, podcast, seminar, moment that influenced you the most.
Oof. When I was deconstructing my understanding of faith, I had a mentor who unpacked historical, cultural, and social and political movements that
Mm.
informed how the US interpreted scripture and spiritual texts. And I cannot give him enough praise and credit and gratitude for helping me see all of the invisible influences that were informing my understanding of faith at the time.
Mm.
What keeps you going?
Oh man. Oh, well, if we're being honest, I entered my 30s and I'm considering taking up caffeine. I've yet to drink coffee, but I really may need to. But in essence, I think it's a drive to. It's funny. I was going to say something that sounded a lot like my older self, which was like, make every day count. And something's changing inwardly. I suppose um, I'm aspiring to have the way that I show up in the world and who I am inside and out contribute to, the well-being and betterment of other people and the planet. And all of the other details in there can be massaged accordingly.
Question 3. You're a young or just new creator, because this could happen at any point in your life, but you're a new creator and you get the first bit of really positive or national attention or just, something that you're not used to and it's positive. What is your best advice for how to handle that and what to do next?
Oof. Well, you're asking someone who takes more of a psychoanalytical approach.
Let's go.
So, I would say, first allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, just like you want to offer yourself in most circumstances, and acknowledge that it is valid to feel that way. Then get real curious about which parts of yourself were tantalized or nervous or overwhelmed by the experience, and get to know, let it be a process of understanding yourself more deeply, so that you can navigate these moments with more conscious awareness. It's easy when something feels like a big hit, or it kind of has like a drug like quality to it. So you just want to be mindful that we're not only chasing peak after peak after peak after peak, but also that we have room to really celebrate the beauty and the positives that are involved with finally making a splash on something you care about. So I think, yeah, it's the both and approach. Validate and affirm the experience, and then thoughtfully reflect. Always.
Absolutely. Alyson, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Good vibes, no red flags.